that's driving a lot of updates. So it's definitely an OS level kind of impetus or initiative that we see drive. But the flip side of that is with the way that we roll publishers out, we have the ability to really remote control the UI of the app real time, dynamically. So every time the user loads the app, we can present different information. We can do A/B testing and see what works and see what doesn't without actually pushing a hard software update. And so with the publishers that we're working with, they can really trial things in small quantities over the course of time and see what works even within a Fire TV or an Xbox app, and then bend the UI without having big software updates necessary to accommodate those things that they see working well. The same philosophy works for VOD versus live, where we can push VOD content that's pretty standard, and we can intersperse that with live and have those live events just show up in the UI when there's live, and not have an empty live section when there's no live events. We supported Yahoo for the NFL streaming. They use our software for all of the Xbox support and Xbox distribution of that event, and it just turned on as opposed to having to push a big update. Hoping that it works, getting it through certification on X number of different platforms. That kind of remote control is super important, and you can use that for kind of moderate design or wholesale design updates as well.
Joe, are you nodding?
Yeah, I'm saying, I kind of look at it more sort of like a framework update. And yes, on the connected devices, it's driven by OS, right? On the browser side, you would be looking at it's your tech stack that you chose, and if you're now buried within that tech stack and the standardization has elevated way past that, then it's probably time to reevaluate whether you should move on to a different thing. And it's a great example with Roku. When you have a completely different framework or different OS, that you get a lot of great stuff. It's probably a good time to kind of see where it's a good time to transition to the new OS.
Right. So let's turn specifically to device platforms again. Early on, Nate, you mentioned the case of the anime on the consoles. So again, we're putting on our publisher, product manager hat. As we said, there's table stakes, right? You probably are going to have to do web, iOS and Android to kind of keep your job, right? As table stakes. But let's say you've got a little bit of ability to go beyond that. Provide us some thoughts or color on what you see now. Are there platforms that you feel are sort of underrated in particular, that people maybe aren't thinking about enough in terms of the sort of potential ROI or the potential engagement that they provide? Anything you've seen work that you think people maybe should be doing more of than they are today? Joe?
Oh, that's an interesting question. For some reason, I don't know why Android TV came into my head right now, but I think that's sort of like an underrated platform. That's, I think it's only out on Sony right now, I think, and so. But I just read an article today where it just talks about how it's just like Google TV, it's a little bit ahead of its time, right? But in terms of navigation and feel and everything, it's really beautiful, right? But this just hasn't had that large of a market yet.
Well, and also, folks, there, I think, Geo has a huge, difference in that. I think consistently, U.S. people have tended to judge, Google's TV efforts purely by U.S. results, right? Which is definitely a bit unfair. Obviously, Android as a generic platform dominates the smart TV market in domestic China, just overwhelmingly dominant. And it has a lot of, for different reasons, right? But reasons why smart TVs are big in China and Android completely dominates there. But yet you'll hear other people say Android's a total failure in the TV space. And it's like, well, sort of, not really, right? So I hear you on that. Nate, any votes for underrated platforms?
Yeah, if you'd asked me maybe a year ago, I would have said Fire TV.
Okay.
We were early kind of believers in that platform. Maybe being from Seattle helps. I don't know.
Hometown.
We've been device for a while. But for a Generation 1 device, I think Amazon really nailed it with the overall design aesthetic, the interface guidelines that they put out, and the ability to put that device on Amazon.com's homepage during holiday. You just see this massive sell-through where they've been the hot-selling device over the last 12 to 18 months. That's changing a little bit with Roku and Apple doing their updates. that's been one that we've been really advocating for clients with the belief that it's going to take off, and it has proven out to do that.
Right. So Tomas, if you guys kind of venture out beyond your web, iOS, Android bunker, where would you go next? What are you intrigued by?
Well, for us, the absolute focus now is Apple TV. I mean, I don't think it's underrated. It's probably overhyped, but that's really going to be our testing ground to move what we do to the connected TVs. I mean, we do gaming consoles, so Xbox and PlayStation, but you know, like Nate said, it really depends on what your content is. And for us, it's really live sports, and we have yet to prove or to be convinced that a connected TV platform is right for that. Just simply because you will always already have it on the telly. So will the user, rather than switching on NBC or ESPN, whatever, will they rather prefer to view that through their connected device? Whereas Netflix is a completely different story, because they have to be on all these devices, because that's the only.
Well, so the one thing I'd say to even folks who were in this room last year and heard the NFL, I think the one thing that was pretty impressive about NFL TV at that time was the notion that you got a tremendous amount of connected TV consumption, Tomas, on the off day.
Yes.
Right. So during the week for the NFL, which is tremendous amount of commentary about practice. You see the same thing in First Division soccer, right? All of the content that surrounds the live event itself. They were saying you get a tremendous amount of consumption of that on a connected TV type device, because the fan wants to keep engaging during the week, right, or between games. So I think that's something maybe to consider. Let's talk about content though a little bit. We'll go back, and again, maybe we'll have some. Feel free to disagree with each other. It's perfectly okay. So, I've got content, and I can show a live feed, 100% long form. I could archive that up and do on demand with it, but I can also slice and dice that up, right, into shorter form. I can do clips, I can do segments, I can do highlights, I can do 6-second binds, right? I can do a lot of different things with the same catalog today. So, again, product manager hat, I've got that, and then I've got these different screens and devices that I want, right? And so again, let's start up with a straw man that's easy to knock over, which is, well, I'll just put the exact same video on every app, on every device, right? I'll get the exact same, 100% product. I have a catalog of 20 files, and you get the 20 files, video on demand. Is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? Maybe it is a great idea, versus trying to really play with the content itself for each segment of the portfolio. Joe, any thoughts?
It could be, but
what would tend to be the factors where you would think where that would work or not work?
It really depends on the actual content itself and the type of content that it is. And I think really the way to look at it is just what works natively, right? So if you're slicing and dicing it into real short form content, it may play much better, as a native Facebook video. Than than anywhere else, right? So I think it's really kind of like really looking at how your audience are participating in the video and what works best natively.
Right. Nate?
I would say, kind of from my frame of reference, you look at, and Tomas mentioned this, users kind of device jumping.
Yeah.
And the use case, the scenario, the context is different as each user, as that user is moving across those devices. Kind of generically or in the hypothetical, it tends to be more short form content on the smaller devices, moving to long form content as you move up that stack. Having said that, I watch my girls interact with devices, and they're watching Frozen on a phone, so it kind of breaks that model. So I think it really does depend on the content, but also the user demographic that you're trying to speak to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for us, our clients, they tend to they tend to pay a lot of money for their content, and they really need to maximize the use of that content. So we provide the tools and really encourage them to slice and dice as much as possible. But it's not necessarily for different devices, but rather increasing the reach on other platforms. So publishing to Twitter, small clips to get people to come and watch your main content is really the objective of that.
Right.
And they use it a lot. And also just, at the end of the day, what matters to people is video views. So if you have like a great event, something great happens in a live event, and you want to get that out there to kind of create this viral buzz about it, so people become aware of it, they consume it, and people who might not come in and watch a full game of something, they certainly will watch an amazing touchdown or something really athletic, and so that's more
I mean, let's talk about that first, maybe two dimensions. One, sort of the different places obviously that can work, but also where you're bringing them back to, I think is an interesting one. We still have some pretty interesting platform challenges today, right, in terms of where I can bring them back to, right? Can I even bring them back to an Apple TV app or something versus dump everybody to the web experience? So, that, whether we're calling that syndication, promotion, right? How does that fit into the overall device portfolio? And am I just driving everybody back to the PC when I do that, or what are your thoughts?
It really, again, completely depends on the content. Okay. Just what I was just thinking of, the whole touchdown thing. I mean, I feel like the Tonight Show or any other, show like that. I mean, like you have segments that work really, really well on YouTube. So you'd watch the full show on, on Apple TV. But then, it's perfect on the phone if you just want to see one interview segment or even just a small soundbite of an interview. It's a perfect thing, but then it drives back to the brand, right? So it doesn't really matter where it's driving back to. It's like you're driving back to the Tonight Show, whether you're watching that on Apple TV or on Roku.
But also fair to say that for that short segment, the clip, the joke, that those native experiences, letting somebody have that experience right inside Twitter, right inside Facebook, that there you're not trying to keep them out all the way into your app. That's great. Would everybody be in agreement with that, or just feel free, right? You let them have that short little experience for the brand wherever they are. But if they want to come back for something maybe more, then maybe that's what the app is there for.
Well, you're really going into sort of like the art of referral trafficking, right? And the best referral traffic is when you don't know you're being referred back somewhere else. So and the best way to do that is if you're giving free content natively where you're actually consuming that content and you feel like, oh, I got value for free right here on Facebook. But then at the same time, I'm going like, hey, but wait a minute, I do want to watch that whole interview. Let me pop that open on my Apple TV. That's a perfect way to do referral traffic.
Yeah, Thomas, I mean, I think your thoughts on this, right? Exactly.